about to get going?
Yeah, I just clicked on start streaming, and let's check.
All right, I think we are live.
And
Let's
if
double check.
I look up Doug Petruzzelli, yeah, it says that you're
It
live.
says that we're live. I just don't see us yet.
And I see a black screen, so it'll take a little bit to
Yeah,
play.
we are live. We are
Perfect.
live. All right, hello everybody. This is the Doug and Fur Show. My name is Doug Petruzzelli. This is my partner in truth.
Fernando.
And today we're having a really special guest. I've actually known him for quite a few years. His name is Joshua Hawthorne. We're excited to have you on the show today. Before we get started, though, I do want to talk specifically about Cuba. We do stand with the Cuban Revolution that is happening. We are going to do a special show tomorrow specifically. We want to give it the time and attention. We didn't want to just give it a short, quick segment on this show. We actually want to give it that time and attention. And please feel free to call in, as you're always free to call in right now for this show. That's, however, not what this show is about. But today we have a special guest. His name is Joshua Hawthorne. I just want to give you a few minutes to just introduce yourself.
Hi, as Doug said, my name is Joshua Hawthorne. I'm a libertarian. People might say far right, but I don't agree with most of what the right or the left agree with, their views. I'm more anti-government in a non-violent way.
Okay.
And I just believe that citizens should protect themselves, and if they fail to protect themselves, that's their own responsibility as adults. And I believe that people should have the right to choose to do good or evil, and good people have the right to choose to protect themselves from evil people.
Yeah, and I really appreciate having you on the show because normally we argue normally our viewpoint is pretty much on the right side. If you guys haven't noticed, it's right, and we're usually debating topics from the viewpoint of the left. So we're saying, oh, this is why the left policy isn't as good as this right policy. But the interesting thing about your views on a lot of these policies is that they would be considered by the majority further right than we are. You were explaining that it's more of a libertarian point of view, but for people that are not familiar with that, it's things that we agree with, but even further to the point where we're like, okay, well, we don't necessarily agree with it to that extent. So I'm very excited about this podcast for that reason,
Right,
because
me
it's
too.
it's unique.
Absolutely. So I want to ask you, if you want to pull up, remember we pulled it up one time, it was the four squares, the
Yeah.
libertarian right. I just want to ask you, would you describe yourself as a libertarian right? Because there's not just left and right. There's actually four different notions where
Really?
people would find themselves. So I want to pull this up, and we'll have it up for the audience to see as well, because you can find yourself to be conservative libertarian, which would be what we would call in the United States the libertarian right, conservative authoritarian, which is more of like what the fascist regimes are with Nazi Germany. Then there's the authoritarian left, which would be like communism, and then there would be the
Libertarian left.
libertarian left, which would be complete anarchist. So I just wanted to ask yourself, if you want to look at that real quick to just kind of get an idea, would you consider yourself on the a libertarian conservative? Or would you consider yourself more on the anarchist scale?
Uh,
By the way, most people they mark themselves right around it's somewhere here. Nobody really considers himself like down here or
Yeah.
here.
Right.
Well, I prefer if I prefer anarchy to democracy.
Really?
Right? Yes.
Wow, I did not expect that.
That's
Like
pretty
because democracy is
You can pull that
based.
down.
Democracy is basically mob rule. Like in a democracy, especially in democracy that America is going towards, is basically if anyone wants to take away your rights, all they have to do is get the majority to vote your rights away, as we've seen with abortion, as we've seen with slavery,
Right.
different things like that. Like if you look at slavery, democracy was working.
Well, let me challenge you on that, because I do agree that pure democracy, all that is mob rule.
Mhm.
Now, I understand that our Constitution has the values of life, liberty, and property to be protected. Now, that has not always been upheld We can look at slavery. We can look at Jim Crow. We can look at many things. Many immigrants that immigrated to the United States. We, as people, have not always upheld to those values, which is the republic. I know me and you've talked personally, privately, off air about that before.
Yeah.
And I believe that the values of the United States are checks and balances that help to check against a pure democracy, which is what the United States is. And we also are not upholding to those values right now when it comes to abortion. I think that we will always try to uphold to those values. So what do you have to say to a republic, a democratic republic, which is the United States, that we have these God-given rights that we can't vote away, and then we get to vote on everything else, that's what I see the United States as, and I want to know your thoughts on that.
Well, like you said, true democracy it can get really dark, as we saw in slavery. However, even with the democracy that we have now, we have police officers that people want to have, an authority to keep evil away, but they're still attacking innocent people. Like, for example, police officers shutting down companies, right? So, I mean, it might not be extreme as what slavery was or what was going on in Nazi Germany.
Right.
However, it is still evil, and people still are dying from our desire to have safety.
Right.
In a sense where we have police officers.
Right.
So, I mean, police officers are not necessarily a democracy. However, that kind of the democracy of America says we want these police officers, and so, I mean, it's still killing people. It's still taking away people's rights and.
So are we? When you say about police officers shutting down businesses, are we talking about specifically like COVID restrictions?
Yes.
I just want to make sure we're in context with that. Go ahead.
No, that I think the point you made is about democracy being mob rule is one that's often overlooked. So that is true that at its core, a pure democracy, meaning everyone votes on everything, ends up being a mob rule. And if people are voting things that are inherently evil, that doesn't make the democracy good. And like you mentioned, slavery was that. The majority agreed that slavery should be a thing, and democracy made that happen. It's a great point. However, on the other spectrum of anarchy, where you don't have any sort of mob rule and everyone makes their own rules, I think that every form of government is flawed to some extent, and when you have to pick between the necessary of two evils, I think that it's better to leave issues like that at the hands of the public than it is at the hands of anarchy, because just look at Chaz. You remember Chaz from last year? At the end of the day, someone's always going to rise to power, and there's no one to stop them, because people are looking for someone to take care of them. And so that being said, I think a middle ground between democracy and quote unquote anarchy. I know that's a tough word, but not anarchy in the sense of everyone does whatever they want, but a middle ground between democracy and not letting mob rule take away our God-given rights is what we're looking for, which is what Doug mentioned, it being a democratic republic.
Well, the reason why I say anarchy is because, and I'm not an anarchist, but I lean toward that because in anarchy, you have is not that you don't have one particular person or one particular group of people controlling the entire country, right?
Right.
What you will be able to do is you will be able to go to a place where they have more of your values, right? And within that circle, you're able to keep evil away. But if you're not able to, it's kind of a bad deal, But you will be in America. It doesn't matter where you go, you still have the federal gun laws, right? Doesn't matter where you go, you still have to pay taxes. Doesn't matter where you go, you're still bound under this government,
So you were saying about being able to go where the rules most fit you.
Yes.
Essentially, it being a bunch of separate tribes,
Yes.
which is essentially a bunch of separate states.
We kind of
And-
have that already,
Yeah.
a little bit.
So that's why
To a
that's what you're
degree.
saying. You're all for states' rights, and you don't want the federal government
Well-
to have all these powers over us because
Yes.
they're exactly.
Well, in a sense that, with the states, you're still bound under the mob of
The state.
the state, right? Versus being able to go to a place where it is fresh. You have your own set of rules outside of the government,
Mm-hmm.
right? In a state, I mean, you do have a breakdown of power. You have the governor, you have your mayors and different people like
County,
that.
city,
Yeah.
local
Yeah, because you
levels.
can keep breaking it down even further,
Right.
counties
Yeah.
and cities.
Right.
But it is they're still bowing to the federal government because the federal government pays them. You know,
Which
they
is
still
a
get
great
money.
point. I think that's what the founding fathers intended for us not to be ruled by the federal government,
Yeah.
and I think that right now we're giving way too much power to the federal government, and that's a big part of this podcast. Like,
right.
hey, let's take it back to the origins, to what
Right.
it was intended, because
Right.
the more power we give to some foreign entity that's far away,
Right.
the more they're going to take our rights away, and the less they understand our
Right,
rights.
right. And the whole point is that we know what our community needs. I know what my
Yes.
county needs far more than some bureaucrat in D.C. who's never been to Broward County.
Exactly.
And that's the point. So we want to move that back. I do want to say, however, I think that there are some states that do just bow a lot more. We look at California; they've bowed a lot more to the federal government
Yeah.
than the state of Florida. We have a great governor, Ron DeSantis, who we love. Well, I don't know. I would assume you
No.
do. Oh, well, maybe you don't. I know Fernando loves. We're a big proponent. He stood up to the federal government. He never did a statewide mask mandate, and that's something that I really appreciate.
But the funny thing is that the states and cities that do bow to the federal government are bowing to the federal government because they were elected to bow to the federal government.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like the people said, "Hey, we want you to follow the federal government."
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's kind of on them because the states that don't bow to the federal government, like Florida, the people elected someone who was going to stand up to the federal government. So at the end of the day, it's a decision of the people. The people said, "Hey, take our rights away," you know.
Well, I mean, my thing is, like, while people will say that DeSantis did not completely bow to the federal government,
Sure, right.
there were still laws passed that shut down a lot of businesses. They went out of business, you know. Their company, they lost employees. I know a few business owners who, you know,
Mm-hmm.
even my own company, my own trucking company, I was hit really hard by the coronavirus. But back to Florida, I mean, they still bow,
Right.
you know, maybe not the extreme, but the thing is evil. It doesn't
Right.
matter how evil it is, you know, it doesn't matter the scale.
Right. Well, I want to get to some points that we kind of discussed a little bit, but I do want to say, so I understand that DeSantis didn't do it maybe exactly how I would want to do it, and that's also me looking at how things are now, knowing what I know now. So I have to also take that in consideration. I can't look at the lens and say, I have the information now, I would have made this decision if I was in
But even
DeSantis'
still,
shoes.
he left a lot of it to the actual counties and municipalities.
And that was the other point I was trying to make. He gave a lot of the emergency powers to the counties to do, which is something I do agree. I happen to be in a county that's one of the bluest counties in the entire state.
Yeah.
So that was frustrating to me, but that is, you know, more or less what I believe the founders had in mind.
But shouldn't he have given the power to the people and not the counties? I mean, we're giving the power to the government that is our power. We're transferring our responsibilities of our own health and the responsibility of our companies
When you say
to the
give the
government.
power to the people, what do you mean?
to choose
To choose whether like to wear a mask, to go to
wear
work,
a mask,
that stuff.
whatever. I mean,
That's the big mask
ultimately-
debate, huh?
Right.
Well, ultimately, your safety is in your own hands.
Yes.
You're an adult, you know. If we're going to put our safety in the government's hand, then we should just put all of our safety into the government's hand.
So what do you think about an individual county? Because trust me, I don't like it because I lived in a county that told me I had to wear a mask anytime
Yeah.
I went to a store and
Mhm.
this and that. They didn't tell me I couldn't wear it I had to wear it on the street, but it was basically every store that was a mandate that any public facility I had to do that. Thank God I don't have to do that anymore. It's a choice. Much more where I think you agree. I think we have a lot of common ground on how things are right now. That being said, I'm much more comfortable with my county government officials making that decision than the state, and damn sure more comfortable than the federal government.
Yeah.
Because it's much easier for me, on this podcast, we can influence our county to vote people like that out of office way easier than we can influence an entire state or even an entire nation besides the United States. So that's why I kind of appreciated that he did it that way. Granted, there's county commissioners and county mayors and things that I disagree with. That
Yeah, but you're never going to agree with everyone.
Right. They did things I didn't like. That being said, I have a lot more power to change what happens in my county than the state, and definitely more than the government. That's why I did appreciate DeSantis. He gave that there. And we, the people, have the power to vote them out next term. We're going to remember, and you better believe we're going to have a podcast on that this election time talking about that.
I feel like the majority of people that vote just vote for whoever they hear other people telling them to vote for without actually knowing, which it kind of sucks. That's one thing that kind of sucks about democracy sometimes. It's that, right? It's like, I remember during the Obama administration, so many people voted for Obama, and then you ask them why, because he's black. Yeah. Seriously? You don't know what he wants to do, you're just voting for him because he's black? And I think that happens with a lot of people. They just vote for Biden because orange man bad, right?
Yeah,
like that type of thing.
But my issue is this, right? The government, they're very straightforward. If you make one mistake with your gun, right, you're going to pay the consequences. Right? Why are we allowing the government to do a lesser evil? Right? We should be straightforward. We should have a clear line as to what is legal, what is illegal, right?
Right.
And if the government crossed that line, we need to make some changes.
Right.
Right? We should not, I don't believe that we should say, hey, Governor DeSantis did better than Como, whatever that guy name is. Or
Really?
I don't think we should.
Okay.
I think we should equally say what you did was against the Constitution. Therefore, there's some changes. Like, you need to go. Like, now.
Well, I don't know if what they did was against the Constitution. I don't agree with it, but I don't think it was against the Constitution.
Yeah, well...
Because the Constitution grants emergency powers, and that's something they consider to be an emergency.
Right. That's the challenge, is what's considered
an emergency. Correct.
That's the problem. That's why we definitely need two sides for checks and balances to check and balance what emergencies are.
No, both of them say it's an emergency, then it's like, okay, well, we kind of elected those people, so.
Wait,
is that a caller?
I don't know. Let's see. Looks like it is.
Who do we have on the line?
Let me see.
To send a voicemail, press 2.
Do we have somebody on the line?
Hello.
Hello, you're on the air with Doug and Fur.
What's up, Doug? It's Javi.
Javi, my boy Javi, what's going on?
What's happening, brother? How are you?
We're doing very well. Thanks for calling in the show.
Yes. I just tuned in a few minutes ago, and I saw that you guys had a pretty interesting topic in hand. But before I get into the topic, I just want to honor you guys and tell you guys and let you guys know that a lot of people such as myself that really don't like dabble in the arena that you guys do, we still listen, man. You guys are doing a bang up job, and just wanted to let you guys know that.
Thanks, man.
Thank you,
really
man.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. We appreciate you too. Anybody who doesn't know, Javi also has a podcast called Kingdom Talks. Please listen to it.
Okay.
Thank you, man. Appreciate that.
So what's going on?
Appreciate it. Not much, man. I just wanted to just kind of give you guys a shout out and encourage you guys. And you guys are doing a really, really good job. Fern, I didn't have the pleasure to meet you yet, but hopefully I'll meet you soon.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. It'd be nice to have you on or something, right?
Yeah. No, we'd love to have you. Thank you so much for calling in, man.
Yeah, we really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, I'll give you a call offline and we'll discuss more about. But I love you and keep doing a great job, man.
Love you too, man.
Good.
Love
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
I have to agree with him. Very, very good podcast.
Oh,
thanks, man. We appreciate it.
Thank you. You remember Javi, right? Javi from when we were at the Young Adults together years ago.
I think I do remember
Javier.
him. I'm very bad with names.
Okay. Well, I'm sure he remembers you too, because I know we were all hanging out at the same time.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyways, I've known Javi since 8 years now, so
Yeah.
he's a good dude. So really happy that he called.
Yeah, thanks for calling, Javi.
And this is kind of a spiritual thing as well, is where you see a lot of churches kind of bowing. They're kind of watering down the word of God. And I'm not saying that by any means that you guys are doing this, but just to seem more attracted to the community and different things like that. I think what is right should be deemed right, and what is wrong should be deemed wrong.
Absolutely.
And but I'm interested to see like what checks and balances do the Constitution have for, well, not maybe not, you guys say that they can exercise some emergency. They can take some emergency actions and different things like that.
Yeah,
I'm
so
not
like say
aware
for
of that.
example, China invades us and they start dropping a bunch of Chinese soldiers by airplane onto our front yards and stuff.
Yeah.
The government can pass emergency powers to say like, hey, every citizen is required to do this, or every citizen that. They can roll out tanks onto the street that they normally don't do, things like that.
Right.
Those are emergency powers in case of an emergency. Or like if, for example, a hurricane is gonna, or like a giant flood is happening or something, they can issue out emergency orders to try to protect the public.
But where in the Constitution does it?
That's a good
Gives
question.
them
I have
that
to,
Well,
right.
it's
I'm not
martial
aware of
law. Martial law is constitutional.
That's at the
Really?
federal level, I believe.
Yeah.
Martial law is at the federal level, but I think there are state emergency powers
But
too.
is this some amendment that they put into the Constitution?
Let me look it up because
Yeah,
I'm actually not sure.
we'll look that up. I know that I've studied. I don't have all that information on the top of my head, but yes, I do know that martial law is constitutional, and I know that is at the federal level.
It's,
from what I understood, that would also grant the federal level to grant states to do the same.
Yeah, so in the Constitution, it says it's implicitly provided in this following statement. The United States Constitution implicitly provides some emergency powers in the article about executive power. Congress may authorize the government to call forth the militia to execute laws, suppress an insurrection, or repel an invasion. And then there are some more of them here as well. So that's at the federal level, and that's implied by the Constitution, which then I think a U.S. code was made for U.S. Code 50, Chapter 34, or something like that. National emergencies, as you see here. So that has to do with national emergencies, and I believe this was made in reference to this emergency powers implied by the Constitution.
Really? I would have to see that because
Yeah,
that is, I mean, who deems who's there to decide what a
What is an
disaster?
emergency
Yeah.
constitute? Yes,
I
and
mean-
that's the whole point, that we wanted to have a two-party system. Two-party systems will create a great check and balance between things, and that was one of the great things of that. If I'm on the far left, which I'm not, and you're on the far right, which you kind of seem like you are, and let's say we are butting heads on everything politically. If we both find something to be an emergency, that usually
It's
would
an
be
emergency.
what would constitute as that. That's
Yeah.
the whole hope. When you come to places like California where everybody's on one side, you find that everything's an emergency. You know, guns are now considered an emergency health crisis in Chicago right now because there's so many people that agree. And now they can use emergency power, emergency spending to pump money into programs that we don't need and are going to do.
Well, that's
actually
what the
nothing
people
for
agree
crime.
with, you know, like.
But those people deserve what they get, good and hard. They voted that many people in.
And that's what you're saying about democracy. It ends up being mob rule, and it ends up taking away your God-given rights just because the mob agrees.
Yeah.
Right. So I definitely get that, and I think that a system of checks and balances helps to prevent that. But when that many people are on board with it, there's only so much you can do. Like.
Right.
But I want to show you guys a very interesting video. Once we get really into the guns and different things like that,
Yeah.
I believe that Republicans and Democrats, they're on the same side. I mean, like I was telling you guys before the show started, like the NRA, I called the NRA, and like they want to pick and choose who can have guns and who can't.
Okay,
you know?
so I think we have some of those in the topics you wanted to talk about. Why don't we get into that?
Yeah,
Since
okay.
We're already
Let's
25
go-
minutes in.
Yeah, let's go into it. So I know one of the first things that you said, you're against taxes, even with representation.
Yes.
Now, I'm very against taxes without representation, but because I believe taxation without representation is theft.
Yes.
Just because I'm the government doesn't mean I get to take your money and do what I want and tell you, oh, it's taxes, so that makes it okay. That is
Yes.
immoral and it's unlawful
Mhm.
under the Constitution. So they're both wrong.
So-
But I want to hear what you have to say about taxes. Like, so you're saying no taxes, we're not supposed to be taxed at all.
Yeah.
What
Yes.
kind of taxes are you talking about? You're talking about income tax, sales tax,
All
that's it.
taxes. The reason being is because I look at things for what I perceive it to be, right? And I try to perceive the truth, right? So taxes is the same definition as extortion, right? Will you pull up the definition for
sure.
extortion? Extortion is basically someone forcing you to pay for a service that they came up with.
This is the practice of obtaining something, especially money, through force or threats.
Right, so it's basically the government comes up with, hey, we're going to build a road, therefore you're forced to pay for it, right? Which is a very dangerous thing, the government owning the roads, because they can shut the road down whenever they want to, and there's nothing we can do about it, right? So basically they can isolate us. But the thing is extortion, and, like, there's no such thing as lesser evil.
Right. Well, I guess the thing is, when it comes to services that the government provides, it's usually, because I'm very pro free market, which it seems like you are too.
Yes.
I'm very pro business picking up and not the government doing the job
Uh-huh.
of private businesses. The problem is when there is a job that needs to be done that's not profitable. Roads are not a profitable service, yet, man, do I rely on roads. Man, I just took a trip to North Carolina. I just got back yesterday, and that was majority on federal highways, state highways. I mean, there probably was not one privately made road the whole way there. That makes it easy for me to connect
Well,
with
even if
people.
even if we take a step back from there, without any taxes, without any way for the government to generate revenue, there must be some way to generate revenue. If it's not with taxes, you must have something else in mind, because otherwise, how do these people get paid?
So the thing is that we have to define is, if a service, if we believe that a service should be provided and no one seemed to be able to provide the service and have it be self-sustainable, then we should just extort people. I mean, like, evil is evil. We cannot. I don't believe that we should be, basically forcing people under threat to pay for something that for our convenience, because we
Right.
don't need roads.
So how do government employees get paid? That's the big question.
Through taxes.
If we take away taxes, how do they get paid?
We do away with the government because now they have no funding.
So that sounds a little bit more not so like the founding fathers, because the founding fathers didn't want anarchists. I
Yes.
mean, they wanted there to be a limited government,
Uh-huh.
and the whole point of it was that government, essentially, for humanity to operate in a civilized way, needed some sort of government, some sort of governance, and it was a necessary evil. Like, that was the whole point, that if men were angels, we wouldn't need any government, and if government could be angels, then we wouldn't need to, have all these checks and balances. The point being is that there needs to be some sort of governance for us to live in a civilized way. We need some type of laws, we need some sort of order, but it does need to be limited. And it sounds to me like you're not saying limited, you're almost saying none. So
Well, yeah, if there's no
if you could-
government, then at that point you disagree with the founding fathers.
Well, yeah, I do, because the thing is, we have to look at it for what it is. Is it extortion? If it is, then we have to say, morally, do we agree with people being extorted
Well, let's
for the greater good?
Well, let me get down so I could navigate this conversation a little bit better. So, do you agree with the founding fathers?
No.
You
No.
don't agree with
No,
the
I
founding
don't agree with them, because, I mean, if I force you to pay for a service,
Uh-huh.
right, is that evil?
Wait,
is
do
that
you-
bad?
Do you agree with the founding fathers in the sense that there should be a government, not about taxes?
Well, no, I don't think that there should be government. The reason being is because that government has to be funded. The only way that there could be a government is if they're taking donations.
Okay.
So, like a volunteer service, almost.
Yeah.
Like a volunteer government. Okay, then let me
Which
ask you
wouldn't
this. So,
exist, yeah.
let me ask you, do you believe, because this is where I believe the rights need to be protected, and where freedom starts, freedom ends. Life, liberty, property. Do you agree with that? Like, those are what I have rights to. That's what the government's supposed to protect. My life, no one's allowed to kill me. Liberty, you're not allowed to imprison or slave me or force labor in any way. And property, you're not allowed to take any of my stuff. I believe that is where, outside of those, I'm allowed to do whatever I want. Outside of that, you're allowed to do whatever I want, whether I like it or not. That's where the line's drawn. That needs to be protected. Other than that, people need to be free. That's kind of my general view. I want to hear, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I do believe that is the things that should be protected. However, I think it's your duty to protect it. I mean, if you look at the Second Amendment, it says, for the security of the free state, the right of the people to bear arms.
Keep and bear arms, yeah.
Keep and bear arms. So it is actually your duty to protect that. If you look this up, 2 Supreme Court justices say that the police officers do not have a legal or constitutional duty to protect you, right? Their only job is to enforce laws. Even, and this is my interpretation of it,
Right.
even if the law goes against the Constitution, right? As
Well,
we see
police
with
officers are not federal police officers. They're usually county, city, so it's not. They're not necessarily we have some liberty in what our laws are going to be. So not necessarily constitutionally. Police officers are not, from what I understand, even part of the Constitution. Like our military.
No, they're
is.
not. Yeah.
Our military is to protect our life, liberty, and property from foreign enemies. Yes, like so. I will agree with you on a constitutional level. It doesn't. That type of protection of our rights does not come from the Constitution. That's for us to have a military to make sure China doesn't come in and take our stuff, enslave us, or kill us. But from a police officer standpoint, that would be on a county level. We decide what laws we want to have.
But no, the Supreme Court says police officers do not have a legal or constitutional duty to protect anyone. 2 Supreme Court justices said that.
Right, and I would almost say that maybe that's true, and I think there's argument for that. However, they're not. Police officers are not federal agents of the state. They're county agents, agents of the county.
Okay.
And they got hired for a job to protect whatever those county laws are. So they can't be brought up on federal charges, but they could be brought up on state charges and county charges if they decide to just let somebody hold up a bank and they wave at them and say bye. Like there are charges for that. Now it couldn't be brought to the Supreme Court and federal charges. I don't know exactly the law on that exactly. But that I think there's room for argument there. But they didn't do their job, and the state could charge them. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. I never thought of.
I'm very curious. Like you have this idea of, at this point, you're saying that you don't agree with our founding fathers and that there should be government at all. There should be no government, and and the ability to protect those 3 freedoms that Doug mentioned are your duty.
Yes.
So, I think this gets philosophical now, right? So this is kind of like what the philosophers John Locke explored when they talked about the island and stuff like that. I mean, this has been done for thousands of years. We've been trying to find a good form of government for thousands of years.
Right.
So if you think you came up with a better one than our founding fathers, then please let me know.
No government. You can't reinvent the wheel. You have to make it obsolete.
So if we get rid of the government entirely, I think that's what people in 5,000, 6,000 years ago tried, and I don't think it worked out for them. Because not everyone is able to defend those 3 liberties. There are going to be people that are stronger. So you get into this whole idea. Even if you look at medieval England, France, whatever, you get feudalism, right? So someone is going to end up being richer and more powerful than someone else. That's just the way natural selection works in terms of economics. So now with my money and my wealth, I'm going to hire people to protect me. And now I'm stronger, and if I want to go take that person's things, it's their duty to protect themselves, but I'm stronger. So even if they try to protect themselves, my 100-man army is going to go take over, and I'm going to keep on growing myself that way.
Well, I mean,
that's where the government and laws step in.
Well, what you're mentioning is some guy who's made himself rich, right? Or maybe he stole the money. I don't know, right? What we have now is a government that we fund who take our stuff.
Yeah, but ignore that. Let's go to because now we need to talk about the lesser evil. I mean, sometimes certain things need to be done that we don't agree with for some sort of safety. There needs to be a balance. if all men were angels, like he said, then we wouldn't need government. That would be perfect, because that way we don't need to be quote unquote extorted, right? We can keep all our money for ourselves. But people are bad. People are evil. So without government, like you said, we should do away with government. How do you stop these things from happening, like the things I just told you?
The thing is, at some point there's going to be a bigger fish, right? At some point there's going to be a stronger God. The key thing is this: our world is unsustainable, right? We cannot sustain this world because there's always going to be someone who's, we have nuclear warheads. There's always going to be someone who's going to say they're going to kill a bunch of people. Right. And then other powerful people start killing each other. You get what I'm saying? Now, we reduce the population to half or whatever, right? I think if you look at the Bible, what God would want for us is basically what he did to Adam and Eve, right? Basically, God created a perfect world.
Right.
However, there was Lucifer, who became the devil, and what God did was God gave Adam and Eve the freedom to choose evil or good.
Right.
Right? That's where a libertarian standpoint comes in.
Right.
Right? I'm not going to put laws on you to stop you from doing evil. However, I'm going to put the protection around myself to insulate me or isolate me from your evil, right? As much as I can, and protect other people that I can, right? What the government does is, in almost every situation, the government put things in place to prevent people from doing evil. To me, that's antichrist. That goes against what God can stop us from sinning if he wants us to. God can stop us from hurting his people and the innocent. However, he gives us that choice.
Okay,
right.
So
and he gives us multiple choices.
Once Adam and Eve chose sin, everything changed.
Yes.
And plus, I was 2 people, not millions. But still, the question remains. So what do we do? Do we throw in the towel and just get rid of the government and just the world dies?
No.
Or how do we handle this? If we get rid of the government, like you're suggesting, how do we handle people?
I say you stack up on the ammunition and you learn how to shoot. I'm not saying you don't learn how to shoot. I'm not saying you don't have ammunition, but for me, I shoot a lot. I carry a lot of rounds of ammunition.
Right.
And I have my guns, Now, I might not be able to protect myself, but it's my choice to decide how much training I get. That's my choice to decide how much ammunition I get,
So.
Well, I have a question. So let's think about a world of prosperity. I'm assuming you're a guy that believes in prosperity. You want us to be wealthier. You want food, healthier foods and medicine. You want that technology for the world, correct? Yeah. We want a prosperous world, because a prosperous world is a more free world. It's a happier world. I know you don't have any kids yet, but I'm assuming you will have them one day, and you will want them to be in a world with even more than you have now.
Yeah.
That's what I want. I think it's our natural inclination to have that. So one of the things that I'm saying is that with your ideas, this is where I've seen it's almost very anarchist. It's very almost hunter-gatherer. You set up your own tribe type thing. And then that also produces less freedom, because then you have to, your whole life is more about survival. It's like, I have this. My goal every day is to wake up and figure out how I can protect what I have, because any day somebody may come and take it from me. And my whole thing is, in a free society where, someone can't take your life, liberty, or property, that produces innovation where we have the world we have today. We have iPhones. We're able to do all these things that we have today. I think that the anarchist view kind of leads us back into, hunter-gatherer. Maybe, we do a little bit of agriculture, but we're not trading with each other. We're so concerned with ourselves because we're afraid the guy next door is going to take all our stuff one day.
Let's look at feudalism. After the fall of Rome, you had feudalism for, maybe 1,000 years or so.
Right.
and innovation went up
Explain,
this much.
Explain feudalism real quick.
Yes, please.
Okay, so I can just look it up.
Yeah. And I know he's going to talk about this, but I just want to say this real quick for you to think. Which is the world we'd rather live in? I know he's going to explain that real quick here, and I wanted
And
to
I
do
would
that.
tell you, I think you would be surprised what my answer would be.
So it says the dominant social system in medieval Europe, in which the nobility held lands from the crown in exchange for military service, and vassals were in turn tenants of the nobles, while the peasants, villains or serfs, were obliged to live on their lord's land and give him homage, labor, or share the produce, notionally in exchange for military protection. So it's kind of, I think that's the system we would go back to. And let me kind of break down what that means. It means that there's a guy that has money,
Right.
and the guy isn't able to plant all the crops and feed himself and protect himself he's not able to do all of that.
Right.
So there are some people that are good at fighting. So he hires them and he says, hey, I'll give you food and I'll give you money and you protect me. And there are these people that, hey, they're good at cooking. Well, you cook for me and I'll pay you and I'll give you a place to live, right? And that essentially becomes a house, kind of like you see on Game of Thrones if you watch Game of Thrones.
Right.
So that becomes a house, and the leader of the house is the Lord, right? And the family is the noble family, and everyone who works for him are servants, right?
Right.
But then at the end of the day, that house can be overpowered by a larger house. So all of these houses pledge homage to the king, who then offers vast military protection to them, and they all call on one another when they need to fight a foreign entity. Like all of these people live in the area of England, and all these people live in the area of France. Now they're going to war, so they'll call on every lord and their little armies to form together a big army and fight. So I think that the world would revert to that state, because there are people that have more money and are stronger than others, and nobody can do everything for themselves. I can't do every single function that needs to be done. I can't do that for myself, except for maybe, like, I don't know, build a little hut and survive, right? So hold on. So just finishing up here really quickly. So if we revert to that, that's the feudalism that was around for 1,000 or more years, and you have that, and there was this much innovation, and then the United States comes around and produces this new form of government, and innovation goes like this, right? And without it, you wouldn't have this phone, we wouldn't have the internet, this laptop.
We wouldn't be podcasting, we wouldn't do anything.
We'd still be worrying about defending ourselves from our neighbor.
But the key thing is, right, yes, we have all these luxuries, but we're mentally destroyed. Our suicide is through the roof. You have divorce is almost more likely to get a divorce than to stay married, right? And this is like from the poorest people to like the most wealthy people, right? The thing is, we're not coping with all of these luxuries. We're not doing as well, right? The thing is, if you had a defined role as a man is to provide for your family, you would be more happy, you would be more fulfilled, you'll have a more fulfilled household than all of these luxuries, because what we have is we have a lot of men who are making a lot of money. They don't need their wife, right? Because he has everything he needs. He can hire someone to cook for her. He can go down the street and go grab dinner, right? The wife don't need her husband because she needs something heavy picked up. It's one phone call away.
Right.
So, with all of these luxuries has come this newfound mental illness where men are not being men, women are not being women, and so now we're just attacking each other because we have too much pleasure.
Right.
What would be, I would rather, right, and one of the founding fathers said, if you want safety over liberty, you don't deserve both, or you're going to leave.
You deserve neither.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So I personally want to retire and live in the woods. I want to give up these luxuries is because I want to do what makes me a better man. Right. And me being a better man is having a clear defined role as a husband, as a father,
Right.
so I can focus on that, and then my wife will be able to have a clear defined role, because I can't go down to the Burger King down the street because there won't be a Burger King down the street.
Well, let me ask you about this real quick, because we can look at things, and we can look at divorce rates that have risen.
Mhm.
Now, one, I want to just talk about that real quick. There's been times where there was a much higher divorce than there is now.
Really, I didn't know that.
Yes, from a generational perspective, yes, we are at a much higher. If we look at the last couple generations, we're moving in more divorce rate. But if we look from a historical perspective, divorce was much more rampant. Especially if we look at the Gospels, the time of the Gospels of when Jesus walked the earth 2,000 years ago, divorce was much more rampant than it is today. So that's one thing. So that kind of takes away the argument just because we have luxuries and wealth and economic, that doesn't necessarily produce. It can be an attributing factor, but everything like that has to do with culture.
I think there was a lot of mental illness back then too. I mean, when you have to cut a guy's bowels open, I'm pretty sure that scars you mentally.
Yeah.
Right.
Or when you see your mom burned at the stake because she did something wrong. Like,
right.
I don't think it's as bad as it was.
Right. And just to say, suicide is on the upswing from a generational perspective. We go back to our grandparents. Yes, our grandparents would say, "Oh, it wasn't like that then."
Yeah.
That's more than likely true. Historically, there is, I mean, we can go back to historic. There's people that offered themselves as human sacrifices, as they believed in it. They thought that they were, going to provide rain for their, stuff, rain for their crops, and that was going to provide for their family. Like that would be very odd to hear people do today. So yes,
I mean ISIS.
Well, yeah. Well, I guess I'm talking from a Western world. We're talking about economic, privileged people, which that's not necessarily them. So I just want to say real quick that that's not necessarily the reason. Yes, wealth can lead you to a place of moral decline. My question is why? And I don't want to say wealth is the only thing that can do this, because it's all about culture and not as much to do with economics. The one thing is it's a spiritual decline. One of the things that we see in the West is and just human nature, when you receive, more economic stability, more wealth, we, as human beings, tend to put our hope in wealth. And I'm guilty of this. I have to die to this. From a biblical perspective, my hope is in God, not endless economic prosperity, which I think is a good thing. I think that's better for human beings. I think it helps, lessen suffering. I think God wants us to have lessen suffering. I think He wants us to create a world where it's our job to rule and subdue the earth. And that goes back to Genesis. And I believe that is providing a way for people to help themselves, to feed their families, to provide ways to end sickness and suffering and longevity. I believe that is our job as believers. And I believe there's practical ways of going about that. However, when you're saying these things, I think the biggest issue is the spiritual issue. Because I can be just a ruthless and poor husband, poor person, all I want, and I can be in complete poverty. And if I have to depend, let's say the instance, the husband and wife, if I need, for me to stick it out with a wife out of complete dependence, that's not really going to make me a good husband. That's going to make me stick around because I need something. The ultimate thing is a spiritual issue, and that I do this out of a desire. I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good father, because that is in me. And the only way that I can produce that in me is through a relationship with God. And I believe the only God is Jesus Christ, the God of the Bible, Abraham, Isaac, and Moses. That's who I believe is the true answer to that problem. Like, I understand that economics could push me away because I don't need a wife anymore. I have money. She can make money. She doesn't need me. My children don't need me because they're growing up in this economic world.
Yeah, but if your cultural, spiritual values are in check, then that won't be an issue.
Right. And even in poverty, if I'm there because I need to be, is that really where I want to be? Is that really where God wants me to be? And that's just the question.
But the thing is, I think is putting yourself and your wife in a atmosphere of where her role is needed. You get what I'm saying? Like, you can be a wealthy man, you could be a king, you could be a president, and your wife still have that role. But as for me, it would be more beneficial to me if I'm in an atmosphere without all of this convenience, without all of these luxuries, where it's not that I'm choosing to go home and eat a home-cooked meal.
Right.
it is, hey, there's no other restaurants around, so
Yeah, it's your freedom and your choice to do that.
Right, exactly. And that's the beauty of the United States. You have every opportunity to build your wealth up, to buy that cabin, and variety of women. I'm sure you can find one that wants the same thing. Like, what a great country. You can do that.
Well, it's actually not as easy as it should be. I mean,
how easy should it be?
I mean, it should
pick
be
one
like,
up off the street or something.
No. I'm not talking about women. I'm talking about wealth.
Okay.
Wealth is pretty easy, right? However,
Well, show me how.
Well, I'll be my financial advisor. She does pretty good.
All right.
But the thing is, in our society, it is very hard because, and I'm still learning this, it's more economical for these big corporations for people to be single, and so they're funding the movies, they're funding the music, and different things like that. If you pay attention, in every genre that I've listened to of music, it is basically telling men to submit to women and women to be dominant, right? It's the very opposite of what would attract a woman, and very opposite from a woman's standpoint what would attract a man. Right? And so it's becoming harder and harder with what we have. I think if we gave up some of our luxuries and convenience that we have, we would be inside of Jesus, right? Because without Jesus is nothing.
Right.
But we would have a more thriving relationships and mental health.
Well,
yeah,
I would say, let me just say this real quick. I would say that is the beauty of the freedom. Like, we'll go back to the First Amendment, the freedom of speech is, I'm not here to shut down. Like, I will disagree with the idea that we should stay single and we shouldn't have any kids and all that. I think that me and you agree. I believe the family is the foundation of society, of a civilized culture. We don't have the family, we have nothing. We are destined for a life of suffering and misery. As an entire society. This is not just emotional. I'm talking about poverty. I'm talking about rights being violated. My point being is, I don't want to silence the ideas putting out there saying that, hey, you should be single, you shouldn't have kids, you should just worry about money. What I want to do is use my freedom to combat that. This is part of the whole point. One, that's the church. Two, this is this podcast. That we combat those ideas to tell, hey, we can push back. I don't want my ideas being shut down. And I want to defend, as much as I would disagree with somebody pushing ideas of saying, hey, be single, be concerned only about yourself, don't have kids, just make money, have fun. Hey, you can say that all day long, but I'll be damned if I'm not the one to push back against that. The other thing is that truth, I am convinced, will silence all falsehoods. I know that without a doubt, there's nobody that made it to 80 years old on their deathbed and has nobody and nothing but a big bank account, didn't look back on their life and say, man, it was worth it that I worked all those hours and that was the life I want to live. I would rather be a poor man financially and rich relationally. I think we can find the balance of the two. But that's what our job is as interpreters of the gospel, as Christians, as believers, to push back against those things. So I understand what you're saying, but it's a slippery slope when we say we want to give up some of those freedoms.
You said luxuries.
The convenience.
Okay.
But giving up the luxury should be a freedom.
Yeah.
You can't force people. I mean, and if you had to force people to give up the luxury, how would you do it without government? You know.
True.
So at the end of the day, if it comes down to freedom, and freedom needs to be protected, and the duty to protect freedom is yours. Well, we run into the issue of strong factions rising up, like I said, and then the other issue is, what if you can't? What if you're 85 years old and you have your wheelchair and you can't defend yourself?
Well, the thing is, because we live in a society where the government has taken care of us, right? It would be hard for a lot of vulnerable people. I mean, think about a single mom who don't have any family, right? It would be hard for vulnerable people to navigate and to have protection for themselves. However, I cannot say that we should extort people just so that way elderly people and vulnerable people will be safe, right? I mean, we're looking at evil here, right? Evil, in this sense, is extortion, right? I think the first thing that we should do is we should end the threat, which is the extortion, and then build from that point, right? In the Bible, Jesus allowed Adam and Eve the freedom to decide that they want to sin. After they sin, Jesus is building his church, his people, getting ready for Jesus' return, after his death and him rising from the dead, right? Jesus is building his church. He's building us, right? If it wasn't for the government, then we will already likely be in our own communities where we will be insulated. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I definitely understand, and I appreciate your ideas. That being said, we are running out of time.
I was going to close it out here.
So I just wanted to say that, but we do want to thank you for having us on thank you for coming on our show. Go ahead.
Yeah, that I just wanted to give a closing perspective. So that is your perspective, and I wanted to give my perspective, and I think that it's one that you would agree with. That in terms of evil and extortion. By the way, this whole topic of anti-tax also gets into anti-government and supporting the citizens' right to bear arms. It pretty much covers all the points that you wanted to talk about. So anyway, my perspective is that while yes, extortion is wrong, I want to find the way that is the most prosperous. And I think the most prosperous involves government. And without government, this has been tried for thousands of years, and it's not quite as prosperous and it's not quite as good as it is now. So I think that government is necessary for that. Small amount of government and a balanced government, but it is necessary, and that's why I think that the government holds a right to tax. And I think tax is different than extortion if it has representation. And tax is important. Now, how much tax? That's what the people need to decide on. But I think that it's a better way to live than without it. And the beauty of it is there's the freedom to vote how much you think it should be. And if you think that there shouldn't be any government, there shouldn't be any tax, then vote for things that go your way. I don't think many people would agree with you. But if the majority of people agree with you, then that's something you can vote your way, Right. But I think that's probably the standpoint that you have as well regarding tax and government and stuff like that.
That's where I would be. But we are out of time. I thank you, everybody, for joining in. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Javi, for calling in. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Sir.
Thank you so much for being here, willing to have civil discussion. We agreed on some things. We disagreed on some things. That's okay. We can still be friends. That's how democracy of a republic works. That's what we're here trying to do. Tomorrow, we are going to have a special show regarding the issues that are coming up in Cuba. Please tune in tomorrow, 8 p.m. Please be ready to call in, have questions. 7:30. I'm sorry, 7:30 tomorrow. We also post about it just as a reminder. Please follow and watch us on Instagram. We'll have posted live, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts.
Our website.
All the information is at the bottom of
at the
top and the bottom of our website there. Yeah. So thank you very much for being on here. Thank you, Joshua. Thank you, everybody.
If you want to be on the show, just DM us, let us know, and we'll be glad to have you, just like we had Joshua here today. It's a lot of fun. And if you feel intimidated, we just have open discussion. We didn't prepare for this. We kind of just, you tell me your points, I tell you my points, and that's pretty much how it goes. There's nothing to it. So if you really want to be on the show, you feel like you have something you want to share, just let us know. All right. And that's it for me.
That's it. This is the Doug and Fair Show.
All right, signing off.